really thrilled. And it's such a weird moment that we're living through in American politics. I feel a bit like the mosquito in the nudist colony. I'm not quite sure where to begin. But for people like me who are older than you, the surrealism of our moment is very evident. When I first set foot on the American campus, it was an experience of innocence. I remember looking at tennis courts stretching as far as the eye could see. I remember stepping into a classroom kind of wide-eyed and thinking of it as sort of a place where Socratic exchange and dialogue would take place. I looked around at America and I thought of American politics as kind of an honest argument between two sides that agreed on goals but disagreed on means. So in other words, if you were to say to people, this is flashing back to the Reagan era, say to people, hey, shouldn't America be prosperous? Yeah. Shouldn't America be strong? Yes. Shouldn't America be an example to the world? Yes. Shouldn't America have healthy, strong communities with law and order? Yes. So the argument was over things like, well, if there's a big pie, how should that be carved? How should we divide this prosperity? But as I say, there was a kind of common goal, or a sense that there was a common goal. And now I look at America, and it seems like we're in a completely different environment. The campus has become a place of sort of unbridled hostility, engines of indoctrination. We look at American politics, and it's almost unrecognizable to those of us from a generation ago. So it is your fate to live at this extraordinary, strange, frightening, also exhilarating moment. And I want to talk briefly about how do we think about it and what do we do about it. We've just been through a really bizarre election, an election in which the two sides didn't really compete against each other. If you really think about it, we were focused on the campaign, and they were focused on the election. And what I mean by that is, on our side, it was rallies, it was motivation, it was organize the troops, it's get out the vote, it's make our case. The Democrats, it almost appeared, were not interested in any of that. First of all, they pick the most preposterous candidate in modern history, a simply ridiculous individual whose lifelong career of corruption is only interrupted by his senility. And here was a guy who seemed not to really want to campaign at all. Let's put a lid on it. It's already 11 a.m. And when we look back on it, we were like, what kind of a campaign was that? But it's not that the other side wasn't busy, but what they were busy getting out the mail-in ballots. And they were busy organizing the counting. And they were busy making sure that the observers are going to be a safe distance away. And they had 400 lawyers ready to file lawsuits because they knew what was coming after the election. So all of this is a way of saying that you've got a bunch of people who thought, and you might even say knew, that they would get away with it. They would get away with it. Now, why did they think that? The reason that they thought that is, first, they have gotten away with it. They always seem to get away with it. We never seem to be able to hold them accountable. And this is not just in elections. Look at the Justice Department. It's very clear now that the deep state was not a simple matter of Comey and Clapper and Page and Brennan and Strzok all going off on independent expeditions. No, somebody instigated it. That was Hillary. Somebody gave the order. That was Obama. And it's almost as if those guys did it because they were like, we dare you to show up at our house and put us in handcuffs. And we didn't do it. Now, in part, we didn't do it because Trump didn't control his own Justice Department for 3 years. But it's an open question whether he controls it now. What I'm trying to get at is a larger point here, which is that I think the other side has come to the view that we, and by we I mean the conservatives, the Republicans, the patriots, the Christians, we're the party of the nice guys, which is another way of saying that we're the party of the namby-pambies, which is another way of saying that we will not do to them what they do to us, and therefore they can and will keep doing it. Their view on the left appears to be, we'll go knock down their monuments because namby-pambies that they are, they wouldn't dream of knocking down our monuments. And we will use the deep state against them because they wouldn't dream of using the deep state against us even if they control the government. And we'll pack the court because they're such principled characters that they appoint judges who don't want to impose their values. They wouldn't dream of packing the court even if they could. And finally, we'll rig elections because A, not only would the other side not dream of doing that, but they're not even going to be able to catch us in the act. And even if they do, there's nothing they can do about it. So it seems to me that, in a weird way, their aggression, their gangsterization, relies on our acquiescence. It relies on us going, okay, we'll try to do better the next time. Okay, you pack the court, we will try to make sure we have principled jurists who love the Constitution and wouldn't dream of imposing their own right-wing views on you, even though your justices think of nothing else than imposing your left-wing views on us. So that, I think, is my sort of diagnosis, because it raises the question of what is the way forward? If they don't want to be friends with us, should we still want to be pleadingly friends with them? If they want to indoctrinate us, how do we respond? How do we respond? If our universities become engines of indoctrination, what do we do about that? Now, I think part of what I'm saying is we need a new kind of Republican Party that recognizes the situation. We need to go a little bit into a sort of wartime mode. We do. Not because we're inherently militaristic, but because that is the reality of our situation. We're living through kind of a Lincoln moment, not so much of a Reagan moment. The Reagan era was a Cold War against a foreign opponent. But, and this is a line I use in the movie Trump Card, we are in a domestic Cold War against a domestic opponent, a cold civil war, you might say. And that means that we're not in a situation where it's easy to be friends with the other side because of what they want to do to us. And let's sort of spell that out a little bit. What is it that the other side wants? Socialism, when you think about it, is typically, you think of it in terms of economic confiscation. It's all about appropriating wealth. But the real goal of the socialists, I don't think, is that. It is to enforce conformity across the whole society. In other words, it is to make us live in their world. think like them, submit to them, do things their way. We have a scene in Trump Card, it's drawn from Orwell's 1984, where the protagonist, Winston, is being interrogated by Big Brother, the deep state, and the interrogators are trying to get him to admit that 2 + 2 is 5. And Winston goes, no way. He goes, you can imprison me, you can lock me up, you can separate me from my family, but I am not going to admit, I'm not going to say, I insist upon the freedom to insist that 2 + 2 is 4. And so what do? They lock him up. They turn out the light, sensory deprivation, no food, no water. He's scared of rats, so they put rats on him. And eventually the poor guy breaks down. And he goes, okay, I admit it. 2 + 2 is 5. Can I go now? And the answer is no, Winston, you can't. Why? Because in your mind, you still think it's 4. You're only saying it's 5 because you know that's what we want to hear. So in other words, we, the state, demand not merely outward conformity, we demand inner submission. So it seems to me that what the left is after is to send our kids to schools where they will be subject to their indoctrination, and to get us as parents to subsidize universities where they get to turn the kids against the values of their parents. And they want us to live in a larger culture in which all the institutions that stand between the individual and the state, civic institutions, churches, are bullied or beaten into submission. That is the point of digital censorship. That is the point of social intimidation. That is the point of Antifa and BLM. If you think about it, they're all sort of doing the same thing. They're enforcing conformity. So how are these forces, in the long term, in the fullest sense of it, how do we fight this? How do we resist it? The simple truth of it is, it seems to me, that long term we have really only one option, which is, as long as this is their agenda, our goal must be to exit their culture completely. Now, this seems like such a crazy idea that for a moment you have to sort of think about it. I really appreciate the very tepid applause for the simple reason that we have to think about what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that a lot of our rhetoric, even now, even at this conference, is totally obsolete. We'll say things like, let's stand up and do a pledge to the American flag. Let's sing the national anthem. Well, if you really think about it, do we actually have a national anthem anymore? Is it really a national anthem when a whole bunch of people on the other side don't like it, don't want to sing it? We can't exactly make them. We suddenly realize with some dismay that the American flag is our flag, but it's really not their flag. They don't want it. So what this means is that a lot of the rhetoric of One America faces the grim reality that what we consider to be America, in fact, the very American exceptionalism that I kind of came to America to enjoy and experience, that is the political target of the left. It's not just that they're trying to destroy America, they're just trying to destroy American exceptionalism. If we lived in their America, a lot of the things that we think are strange, rigged elections, well, elections are rigged all over the world. For most people around the world, for my family in India, for example, they go, rigged elections, yeah, that's kind of the way it is. Political corruption, that's kind of the way it is. If you speak out against the government, a bunch of goons shows up at your house and beats you to a pulp. That's kind of the way it is. In other words, for most of the world, that's normalcy. But in America, it's not the way it's been. But it is the way the left is trying to make it. And so, what I'm saying is if we refuse to live in their America, and we don't secede, we can secede inside of America. We secede from their institutions, we get out. And I say this because what it means, long term, is we have to create our own schools. And we have to create our own universities. We have to deliver high-quality education at a much lower cost than is done now. We would make the whole existing higher education system obsolete. We need our own media. Last November, when my family met with Trump, kind of weirdly now, he goes, Dineesh, what do you think I should do after the presidency? And took me by surprise a little bit, but he meant after the presidency, and I said, well, Mr. Trump, I think you should start a network. Not a cable channel, not talk radio on TV, a lifestyle network, more like CBS. You have the money, you have the influence, most important, you already have the audience. So you would have half the country. Let everybody else fight over the other half. It's an economic opportunity. Do it. Do it. I think at that point, it's sort of, he was digesting it. He's like, all right, were you saying you want me to get out of real estate? And I didn't say it, but I was kind of saying, you know, yeah, absolutely. Now, we need to make our own movies. We need to have our own comedians. What I'm saying is we create our own culture, we live in it, and thanks to the Second Amendment, we defend it. Now, none of this is to suggest that because we live in a politicized moment, that somehow the great idealistic mission of education, education in the true sense, in the true Socratic sense, this is not something that you should give up on. This is not something that you should forget about. I think back to Socrates on the streets of Athens, and it's such a sort of iconic picture. You've got this rather absurd, toga-clad, bald guy who seems to have no job. And on the street, he just goes around asking people questions. He seems to have nothing to do other than to explore things like, what is justice? You know, what is truth? And you think to yourself, wow, Athens must have been in a moment of kind of glorious, affluent idleness that enables this guy to kind of pass his time on the street every day. It's kind of like an intelligent homeless guy. But then you realize that this was not in fact the case. At the very time Socrates is doing this, Athens is in the middle of a terrible fratricidal war against Sparta that would last 25 years and destroy Athens, which would never rise again and live only as an ideal for future generations to emulate. So this kind of Socratic discourse is taking place under conditions that are of the most extreme and dire sort. And yet, Socrates knows that some things are eternal, some things live on, some things can never be killed off no matter how crazy the political environment. For me, a lot of the falling in love with America was falling in love with education in the true sense, and the university as the true sense. It's a real pity that our universities have become what they are. It's such an embarrassment and such a crime that your elders have sort of performed upon you, not to expose you in a way to what true learning is all about. But the real beauty is that this true learning is available in books. It's still there, and it's actually there for the taking. And in today's environment of technology, it's accessible to you. So I guess what I'm saying is to not lose sight of the permanent things, even as we fight in the here and now, not just for this election, which we should, but in the bigger sense. How do we remake this Republican Party? You know, years ago, my mom said to me, she goes, "Dineesh, I don't understand American politics. Explain it to me in like one sentence." I'm like, "Okay, Mom, I'll do my best. We have two parties in America. We've got a stupid party, and we've got an evil party. I'm a proud member of the stupid party." I guess if I were telling her today, I would say there are some people in this country who are stupid and evil. Those people are called never-Trumpers. This is a difficult period the country is going through, but I am confident that because truth is on our side, and also courage. When I was younger, I admired people like Solzhenitsyn, Hayek, William F. Buckley, George Will, and I still do. But they don't represent today my highest form of excellence, because the highest form of excellence is not wisdom, it's courage. Courage is the most important virtue because it's actually the basis for all the other virtues. You need courage to be prudent. You need courage to be wise and to speak wisely. Today I ask myself not just whose book would I rather read, but who would I like to be in if I had to be in a foxhole? Would I want to be in a foxhole with George Will? No. But if we can summon up wisdom and courage, then allied with deep spiritual faith, we become invincible. We become the future, and we will carry it and save the country and bring us one step closer to that dream that Reagan evoked in 1984 when he spoke very beautifully about morning in America. Thank you very much. Thank you.